Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mr. Happy, aka Mr. Happy Mondays, a weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Now, I got a couple of things. One, it's been a pretty good week. We've managed to get quite a few videos out in this last week, and this coming week is going to be a busy one. There's going to be some basic clear videos for Delibrum, Normal, and Savage. If I get around to the Blue Mage stuff before the announcement stream on Friday, there's definitely going to be clears of that. And we plan on doing guides, of course, for Delibrum, the Resistance Weapon Quest, and anything else that I actually care about. Sky Steel Tools, not really my thing, so probably not going to make any videos on that this coming week. Plus, I have some other things that are in the works, including a sponsored video for Dissidia Opera Omnia, as well as a sponsored ad spot for a couple of things. We sprinkled a couple of those in last week. Some of them were late. Some of them, the videos were late. So it is what it is. The other thing is, generally for Mondays, I tend to at least quickly glance through my comment section to look for questions to see, I guess, how long approximately. And normally I don't read through all of them, but I didn't see too much when I glanced over it. So the whole video might be a lightning round of just going through the comments and grabbing whatever's there, as opposed to breaking it down question by question. I don't know. It's the very sparse week in terms of Q&A. We have those occasionally, but don't forget, you can ask questions in the comments section of the video below. And given we have a patch and an announcement stream, I'm sure it's going to be a little bit more filled, specifically 2 weeks from now in terms of the length of the video. Granted, we'll have all sorts of content out about the announcement stream and all that and whatnot, I suppose. Anyway, before I get started with what is likely to be just one giant lightning round, with it not being here on the bottom, thank you to our sponsors over on Patreon for supporting. They just do that because they want to. They don't really get anything out of it, but I'm grateful for them. So their names, they get to scroll all up on the screen right now. Special thanks to our patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Janova, and Kurenai Oni, who have gone above and beyond over on the Patreon. So with that, thank you to them. Thank you to our regular Patreon sponsors. Of course, thank you to all of you tuning in, watching the video, asking questions. Speaking of which, let's go on to that very short lightning round style video. All right, yeah, there's a mix of some that are just questions without the hashtag, or just ones that I don't know if they're serious, or like, it almost feels like there's like 4 or 5 people that decided to all ask like really simple questions, or like questions that, I don't know, they almost feel like trolling, but maybe it's not, and I'm just reading too much into it, but that's how it feels when I'm reading through it. Some people commenting on the cast bar separation stuff. Yes, whoever was asking that question last week, I don't remember who it was, tons of comments in the comment section, and I was correct. You can indeed swap them. It is in the HUD layout. I don't do it personally, separating the enemy cast bar from the actual target HP bar, but it can be done. I was correct in assuming that, just not something that I've done personally, so thank you to everyone who commented about that from last week. Now, somebody asked a very simple question: what actions will I be taking into the first Delibrum? Well, Delibrum Normal I don't really care about too much, but I am going to experiment with some stuff while I'm going through Normal, in hopes of that knowledge helping us out a lot in Savage. One of the big things in Baldesion Arsenal was actually the death action. You can just mow through so many parts of Baldesion if even just a few people bring death. So with that in mind, I have to assume it's going to be equally as useful when we actually go over into, into Delibrum Savage. So I'm going to be bringing Ordained and Death into normal mode. That is the #1 priority, to try and see if there's a relation between things that can be death in normal mode and things that can be death in Savage, because that's going to make our progress go super smooth. Other than that, in Savage itself, our group has already completely coordinated what we want each individual alliance and each player in those alliances bringing, in order to both make teams self-sufficient, as well as make sure that as many different advantages or potential advantages are covered. Making sure some people have Banish, some people have Dispel, some people have Paralyze, some people have Steel Sting, some people have Spellforge, some people have Protect, some people have Shell, Bravery, and then a few extra things for just big damage pumping in the case that we just really need to kill something ASAP. Now, I don't know if that's going to change based on how the resurrection rules end up working, if we have to use Arise, for example, in order to resurrect people, if Phoenix Downs are sufficient, if Re-Raisers work just fine, if there's a limit to actually resurrecting. These are all questions we'll have to wait for the patch notes and or actually getting into Delibrum Savage to answer. So other than giving you the general death idea, that's the closest thing I can really get to having an idea of what we will be doing. Now, the next question after that, which did have the hashtag, thank you, hey Habs, how you doing? Of all the jobs in the game, which do you think will get the most changes in 6.0? I think Summoner. Summoner is the easy answer on both fronts. I don't see a way in which they don't address Summoner in some way. It just needs help. It's not even that it needs help. There are plenty of people who like it the way it is now, but it's felt like it's gone through like an identity crisis. Like, it wants to be just like the Summoner it's always been, but at the same time, it's like, it wants to move in a new direction, but it's still kind of stuck in its current ways with being that like dot and burst. I've always felt like they've been pushing it ever so slightly in the direction of being more focused on your pet abilities, your summons, and now that those things are on the actual hotbars, GCDs, their movement tools, they're effective, it's about fixing the pet system. And either they fix the pet system or they can it and give them some other system that just incorporates summons into their basic skills. So Summoner is the number one job I'm keeping my eye out on. Bard and Black Mage are close seconds. Bard because didn't really get anything exciting going into Shadowbringer, so I'm curious how it'll end up in the next expansion. And Black Mage, because I love Black Mage at 80, and I'm afraid they're going to screw it up. So those are the 3 jobs I'm keeping a very, very close eye on going into 6.0. Now, what else do we have here? Other than the Tower of Gods, which Ultimate would you like to see in 5.5? So Tower of Gods more specifically, I don't think, and let's just say it's not impossible, but it'd be very unlikely to see Tower of Gods in particular. Because the Tower of Gods has never been hard confirmed to actually be Sephiroth, Sophia, and Zervan. It's always been a fan theory that was never confirmed in any sort of Ultimania or whatnot. But I do believe the designs are deliberately somewhat mimic the themes that all 3 of the Warring Triad actually pertain, or what pertains to them thematically. So with that, it's not Tower of Gods. It's specifically the Triad, because in Final Fantasy XIV, it unfortunately wouldn't make any sense for Kefka to have anything to do with the Warring Triad. They both come from Final Fantasy VI, but in Final Fantasy XIV, the lore is very important to the structure of an Ultimate. An Ultimate is supposed to be a grand embellishing of something that happened. And for him to just go, oh yeah, that Kefka dude, that random like projection that you fought in Omega, some story about a mage from another universe or dimension, yeah, we'll just throw that in there. You know what I mean? Like, it makes sense to those of us who have played into Final Fantasy VI, but it doesn't make sense in Ultimate. So how they end up doing that is a big question, because what does the penultimate phase, or I'm sorry, not the penultimate, the end phase, the ultimate phase for Warring Triad actually end up being? All 3 of them at once, and that's it? I feel like they'd want to do something grander than that. But I mean, honestly, God Kefka is the grandest part of the Tower of God, so they'd have to come up with something new anyway. You know what I mean? So Warring Triad's a big one. I think Thornton and Nidhogg are more likely to be featured in some way. The Dragon Song War, the epic of the Dragon Song War, something along those lines, I feel like is the more likely thing to actually occur. Now, somebody actually did also ask, hey Haps, hope you're doing well. Hope the same for you. You've talked about Summoner needing a rework, but what would you actually rework? Yeah, okay, so I've kind of addressed that in talking about the pet AI. It's a big point of contention, as you've brought up here, but the actual rotation flows mostly smoothly. I'd like them to finally commit all to one theme. Summoner started as like a warlock with like tiny pets. Then in Heavensward, they got Bahamut. They got a few new tools to like just basically manage their dots. Then they moved another step further. They had Dreadworm Trance, and then they had Bahamut and Stormblood, and then they've moved over to Phoenix. And as they've gone on, the whole warlocky thing, it's kind of persisted in the most bare minimum form, but they've pushed it more and more into an actual summoner identity. I feel like they're one last push to getting that. It doesn't mean they have to get rid of the dots or Fester in particular, but the gameplay feels like it needs to be just slightly more focused on the pets, on the summons. And if they don't fix the pet AI, that's going to be hard to do. So honestly, that is the biggest thing that I'm keeping my eye on, and I hope they get it right, because I feel like Summoner's right there. It's a little intimidating for most players, but it's so close to being thematically on point, almost as thematically on point as Bard was in Stormblood, which I think is the most thematically on point a DPS Bard could have actually been. Unfortunately, Shadowbringers didn't do much to enhance that, just kind of threw some stuff on top, didn't give it some of the things it needed, and that's really, really unfortunate. Somebody asked, where did I get my computer glasses? These are really old. These are, what are they called, Gunners? Yeah, these are Gunners. I got these at a Best Buy when I was working in New York City before I even did this for a living, when I was internal tech support for a startup. Oh, those were the times. But yeah, you can get all sorts of these. You can also just download a f.lux, or just Flux, I believe, which will tint your screens. Basically, it'll diminish the blue light of your screens, which will greatly help out. It's essentially what these glasses achieve. And if you're only looking at 1 or 2 computer monitors, that'll save you a bit of money as well. Then we have another question here. Someone's been watching my content for years. Big fan of State of the Realm, good chemistry, easy listening in particular whenever you have Ethos on to discuss what's actually happening in the world. Yeah, that's when they make us feel dumb. First time asker, how do you feel about Shadowbringers content versus Stormblood? But it feels like you really like Shadowbringers, but it just seems like Stormblood got a lot more stuff to do. We had all the same EX and Savage, but Eureka is way bigger and more interesting content versus the Southern Front. And then, even though you accept a lot of people didn't like it, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think Shadowbringers has been an overall higher quality of content. But the big thing they've tried to shy away from doing in Shadowbringers is coming up with something and just repeating it 4 times. Now, the certain things are in the formula. A dungeon, a savage raid, a normal raid. You know, those EX trials, all those things are always there. They're always staples, and they're always consistent. Any player can log in any specific patch and expect to find the feature that is generally associated with that patch, as has been since all the way back in 2.0. When it came to Shadowbringers, they focused a lot less on trying to suck a lot of time out of you and make sure that you were only spending time on the things you wanted to and that you had time to go do other things. It's just, I made a video about it a few months ago where it's like the antithesis of MMOs, where Final Fantasy XIV, as time has gone on, has tried less and less to make it your sole addiction, your sole obsession, and make it more of an approachable, I can step in or step out at any time MMO, so nobody feels bad about leaving, and everyone can come back when they feel comfortable doing so. Whether or not that works out in the long run, I feel like is irrelevant of the question, but I've really enjoyed Shadowbringers content. It just felt of a higher quality across the board. Story, fights, everything. The only thing is the Epic of Alexander I don't like as much as the other 2 Ultimates from both a prog perspective and a reclear perspective, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't like it. It's just something I don't really want to farm or like get all the weapons for like the old ones. So, but that's such a small portion of the game. As for Bosnia versus Eureka, yeah, a lot of people didn't like Eureka. Everyone complained, and yeah, Baldesion at the end was really cool. And most of Eureka was tolerable and or somewhat enjoyable. I think Pyros and Hydatos were okay, but then Pagos and Onymos, they just didn't go over well. And I think they really need to make it work. They also just didn't want to do 4 zones again. They very specifically stated they want to do something different for every part of the Resistance weapon and the Save the Queen quest lines, which are running parallel to one another. And they've done that. They gave us a giant grand solo instance and a bonus extreme fight the first time. They gave us essentially Eureka 2.0, but in a much more palatable form with some new systems involved. The critical engagements, the 1v1s with the duels. Love those. Castrum, this time fulfilling the promise of what BA was supposed to be, a public dungeon and not a raid that feels gated off to people who aren't just going on to Discord and pre-making groups. That got saved for the next part, which now is a 24-player raid, a bonus one, with no role restrictions like Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High, and a 48-man Savage, which is likely to be much closer to the Baldesion Arsenal in terms of overall theme and feeling. Then we get another field area in 5.5, which is supposed to have some other new stuff that we can work on to progress. No idea how it's actually going to be, but that we'll have to wait and see. So Shadowbringers, quality's definitely been higher. Stormblood went for a little more quantity and definitely got criticized for it. And but it also set a lot of foundations. I mean, Stormblood did give us Ultimate. It was the start of that. And honestly, I still look back on Stormblood content as underrated because it just did a lot to set foundations for the future. I just think Shadowbringers has brought the quality up without trying to spam us with quantity, focusing more on the little details that players can talk about and appreciate for longer instead of farming the crap out of them and then complaining. At least that's my interpretation of it. So, as you say, you were someone who didn't really get to play Stormblood at the time, and you're just kind of looking back on it overall. That's my perspective on it. It may not be everyone's, but it's my perspective. Now, there's a lot of comments in the comment section, I suppose, talking about the alt question from the previous week. Some people saying maybe I missed the point, or I definitely missed the point, as well as people talking about different reasons why the game may be more or less alt-friendly. Some people, of course, referring to they want you to pay for retainers in order to get more storage space. There used to be an exploit where somebody points this out, used to be an exploit where you could actually friend yourself, and you can't do that anymore because you could just basically manipulate all like mail systems and stuff like that. Not having things like shared storage. Also trying to, of course, stop people from making guild scammers or sellers. That's a big thing. Final Fantasy XIV limits a lot of things that you wouldn't think they would, because like on paper, it's like, why would you do that? But they do it specifically for the people that abuse the system. I mean, we can't even chat in PvP. You have to use those quick buttons to talk. And I think those are better for communicating important points. But let's be real here. If somebody wants to communicate, they want to communicate something important, then it's not gonna, how do I put this? It's not gonna matter whether or not you limit the words people can use. Harassment, it just takes a lot of different forms. When it comes to the way PvP works now, people just spam like, where are you? Where are you? Or like some sort of like really annoying message. They just like press the button a billion times. Be like, over here, over here, over here, over here. Target, 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 like a billion times. And it's a different kind of harassment. It's not saying you suck, go die, I hate you. But I never agreed with it. It really hurt PvP for me because I don't enjoy that being the only interaction that I have with people during the feast. I know that's why I actually stopped doing it, was because we couldn't, and I quote, use our words anymore. Now, as for the actual alt question, so going again into a lot of the reasons why they do those things, I remember skipping ahead and seeing it while I was looking through the question itself. Why does Square Enix limit mod station items to one per character where the tech is there for all characters? There is actually a technical explanation for that. It's technical debt. Unfortunately, when the game was initially made and then rushed to be remade, the amount of all character keys that are available for the game is limited. I don't think it's a reasonable excuse. I think it's something they should be actively working on, but at the moment, that's what they have to work with. So characters that items that can only be on a single character are there so they can they can leave open space for all character keys to actually be used in the mod station. They need to fix that. That is definitely a technical debt that needs to be resolved. It's just been way too long. Why does Square Enix make it incredibly difficult to mail items? The reason we mentioned earlier, people would exploit it and use it to abuse certain systems in the game, and they are trying to stop people from doing that. Now, account shared stash, I do agree with. I would really like to have that, but again, the game is, it's hard to tell how much of that is they're trying to stop people from abusing things versus how much they just really don't expect the average player to play on more than one character. We have an answer for the first one, but for the second one, we really don't have one. But we know that they do a lot of these things specifically to prevent abuse of the system, things I can't even think of. People are really devious, and especially RMT when it comes to stuff like that. Why don't they allow characters to share pets mounts? You know, again, that one I think is strictly just they didn't think about it. It's just not a system. It's really hard to tell because just A Realm Reborn took on so much technical debt. Look how it took until Shadowbringers before we could have every mount fly. And we've had flying since 3.0. Now, we've made some strides in that department, but again, it's really hard to tell where all of it is technical debt and where it's a deliberate decision based on either monetary gains or technical debt or monetary. It's hard to draw that line because we just don't know, because the reason is there for both things. And it's a very legitimate reason. Anyone who's had to deal with technical debt in any sort of programming can tell you that it's brutal when you have to try to work around those things and how it can be a monstrous task to try and overcome them. So that's a rough one. That's a rough one. So we have answers to some of those and we don't have answers to some of those. So that's unfortunately the most detail I can give you on any individual point that you brought up in regards to last week's question. Let's see. I did have another one. Maybe consider taking a week break. I hate breaks. That's the truth. Sometimes I take them because, like, it's just, you have to, right? But a week, I drive myself crazy. What would I do? I'd end up just working on YouTube videos. If I didn't work on stream, I would just end up working on YouTube videos the whole weekend. If I'm not going to work on YouTube videos, I'm going to stream. I'm addicted to work. What can I say? I like to always be keeping busy, or at least doing my best to try and keep busy, because sometimes I'm not great at it, but I just can't sit around. It just doesn't feel right. I feel like I'm just, like I'm wasting opportunities, or I'm missing a chance to come up with an idea or to even just consider the next big video idea. And I just can't let that idea go. But thank you for the concern, all the same. Should I get rank 15 in Bosnia before Delubrum? I don't think you'll need rank 15. I think you should get it anyway. It's really easy to get, especially if you've already finished Castrum. You just go spam skirmishes and CEs for a few hours and you'll be done. But I don't think you'll need it. I would just recommend getting it. That's the best that I can say. Let's see. What are your thoughts on some achievement rewards not being worth the effort? Yeah, they have a lot of really bad achievements. Most of them... You just reminded me. I found out today that there is an achievement in ocean fishing where you have to fish up a total of 3 million points. So that's across every single time you do ocean fishing. You take the boat, you ride the route. And if you get to 3 million cumulative, you get a title, World Class Troller. I want that so bad. So I am going to do those. So yeah, I couldn't answer why, obviously. It just feels like they need to have achievements for crazy things people want to grind out. And they know some people will do them. For some people, that is content. And it may not make sense to a lot of us, but you know, I do hope for better achievements in the future, but they're not going to stop making those ones, even if they do. But having the lore videos you did, I just got tired of going to the what's it called? To the book in the in-room and just watching the cutscenes and just reading it back to people. I just got tired of doing it. We did very, very few actual lore videos where I'd like, hey, this is happening in the story, and here's what I think it means and whatnot. We only do them when I think it's like critical. Like when I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to make this video. Like I feel like I have to make that video. Because otherwise we just talk about it on State of the Realm. Whenever Ethos comes on and we do the lore episode spoiler casts, as we call them. We talk about it all there. So I have all that content on my channel. You should go watch the State of the Realm spoiler cast. They're long, but they're as deep a dive as you're going to get into most of the story elements. Last week you answered my question about the thing in the trailer with we don't know when. Well, my question was where. We don't know that either. So the answer doesn't change. I do recommend making not even making that. Adding all caps to some of these questions can definitely help because I do try to go through these relatively quick on a Sunday after I've been streaming for 11 hours because that's what I do on Sundays now, apparently. Stream for 11 hours. And yeah, but for the answer to where, the answer is still, we don't know. So, the answer didn't change, surprisingly enough. So either way, still kind of screwed on that one. Adding a true dual wielding to 14. If you mean wearing two different weapons, no. That's never going to happen because they already have issues with getting gear to everybody as it is, with weapon drops. The last thing they're going to do is make you... They don't even like Paladin having sword and shield. They said if they could, if not for glamour reasons, they would combine them. They would get rid of the shield and combine the sword and the shield, but people want to be able to freely wear one shield with a different sword. So they want to go completely in the opposite direction because, you know, being able to wear two different weapons is kind of cool a little bit, but it just makes for such a headache when it comes to actually doing weapons for content, for any of the different contents that they're actually doing it. So the answer is never. They will never do it. Now, as a purely aesthetic thing, I'm glad you put that in there. That I think could happen. But the way items and item information is done in 14, with both of them filling one equipment slot, they'd have to develop an entire subsystem for just that item slot to make it happen. I don't think they're ever going to consider that cost effective because it's just not. I don't think there's a big enough... It would affect so few jobs, and I don't think enough people are actively thinking about it for them to say, yeah, that's something we need to work on over various other systems. So no, I don't think, the answer is never. I'm not even going to say I don't think they'll ever do it. They will never do it. And you asked why, and I think I've adequately explained that reason. Whether or not you accept that, you know, go ahead and, you know, not be happy with that answer, but it is the answer. That much I can say with absolute certainty. Any news of 14 coming to Xbox? I wouldn't be surprised to see it announced on the 5th. Obviously, we expect an official PS5 version to be announced, so with the recent change to Xbox, where they tried to price hike people and they were not happy, but they also were removing the need to have the Xbox Gold or Xbox whatever, Silver or Gold for online games. The fact that they've removed that's a big hurdle. There was one other hurdle with 14 going to Xbox, and that's they wanted the option to have Xbox exclusive servers because that was part of their cross-platform policy. Any game that was cross-platform with Xbox also needed to have the ability for an Xbox player to choose to only play with other Xbox players, and 14's not going to do that. If they lighten up on that, then that's it. The road is paved. We know that Microsoft said they'd like to work with Yoshi P and his team on a DirectX 12 port of the game, to update it, to bring it into the next technical era. And there's always a possibility, but it's just been so long that it's kind of just a meme. But I'm never going to be surprised. If they do announce it, I'll be like, finally, not like, oh no. It's like, I feel like it's the time, right? It feels like it's the time. But every year, people think, oh, they're going to announce it at E3. Oh, they're going to announce it at FanFest. Hasn't happened yet. So, can't say I'm hopeful, but it doesn't affect me. So it's hard for me to be hopeful about something I don't care about. Okay, so I was wrong about doing... I don't know why. Why don't I feel like I didn't? Maybe I just didn't see any of these questions. Oh well, I've already committed to the lightning round theme, and we're gonna stick to it because I've already committed to it. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. How's it going, boss? Been good, I hope. Yeah. Nobody says hello. Here's one for you. People have been very good with hellos today. Thank you for that. On to the question: if we were to return to the first for a dungeon, noted we wouldn't have any trust members besides Reen and Lena. The possibility of adding role quest members as trust could be an option. It doesn't give us a healer. One to assume that the Makote girl could be a hint at a new trust and a new healer being chemist. Would it be safe to think that? It's too easy to get deep into your own theory, so I'd like some clarity. I think so. I did make a video about what I think the new jobs will be. Apothecary does sit as the one I feel is most likely to actually be something that's not specifically apothecary, not chemist, because of some terminology they used in the main scenario. But I don't think your reason for using the trusts to think that makes as much sense as just looking at the character and the dialogue. I think that's like you're trying to add a layer, which I think you're on point in considering that. But I think adding the layer of just because we need a trust for a healer, it's a lot of ifs stacked on top of each other. If we go back to the first, if there's a new dungeon in there, if we need to use trust for that, it's just layer on layer when your final point of what the character says in the story is enough to get to the closure that you're looking for. So I personally don't think we're going to go back to the first. I don't think we're going to go back there for a new dungeon. Of course, what the hell do I know? But your guess was good without that, and I don't think she's going to become a trust, I guess, is ultimately the point. But what I think doesn't matter. What happens is what matters. So that's it. There's another question here about Party Finder content sellers just taking over the Party Finder, and asking if I got a chance to ask Yoshi P or one of the devs again, would I consider asking them what they plan to do? Yeah, it's out of control. I haven't had the opportunity to have an interview with him. I mean, there's been a pandemic, so physically there hasn't been the opportunity, but the team's also been super busy, so we've only seen the occasional interview, a lot of the JP sites get one out all at the same time, and then we've seen one occasionally from Gamer Escape, and I think one or two others from some other outlets. So it's been pretty tough to get in there to ask questions. But yeah, I mean, I consider it because it's crazy to think. I get that they say they can't use outside sources, but they do. We've seen them do it with Twitch, where people have been banned for shaming somebody for their performance. We've seen that with Twitch. So it's weird to me that they see all that in the Party Finder and they don't go, we should do something about it. You know what I mean? It's weird to me. So yeah, I've put that on the list of things. I've got a list of things if I get the chance, I gotta ask him about some of these things. So that one's up there because it's getting more and more out of control. It's absolutely insane. So I'm gonna put the hashtag and then commented on a bunch of points from last week, and you know what? That's fine, but it's not a question, so I will move past it. But I'll acknowledge, I saw you talking about, even without being into anime, I choose the following. You, person, I see all the things you'd like. It's just not a question. So I'm going to move on to the next one. If ranged melee attacks didn't break combos. Yeah, I forgot that was even a question last week. Yeah, I said I'd be totally down for that. Even if it kind of interrupts the idea of maybe working on how to keep optimal uptime. I don't think it hurts enough. I've thought about that more since last week. That it's might as well just give them that. Prefer 2 fights. Oh, that's about the Savage being split up into 2 actual fights. Yeah, I'm still in the boat that I just X-Death Neo X. I think that if I look at the current raid tier and I look at the final fight in our current raid tier, I'd rather that be 2 different fights and then be a little longer each, as opposed to what it is now. I think if I look back to my ideal door boss, X-Death and Neo X-Death is still going to be king. It's just... yeah, I don't know. It's okay to prefer 2 fights. It's just that I want more fights anyway. That's the thing. I do want more fights in 14 altogether anyway. I want another raid boss per Savage tier. Everyone wants more of everything. If you like something, you of course want more of it. So, it's just that I haven't seen the bosses that we've seen don't make me go, this should be 2 fights. Because there would need to be more to them for them to be 2 fights. That's the problem. It's like trying to imagine what they'd be like if it was 2 fights, if they were longer, if there was more to them, but without, like, we're not the one making the mechanics, you know, we're not the one developing it, we're not considering, you know, having that extra 3 minutes on each fight, 4 minutes on each fight, whatever it may be. And that adds a lot of complications. But what I want always, more fights. If it means splitting up a boss into 2 instead of doing a door boss, yeah, you know what? I'm super down for that. They just need to be refined. They can't be these like 8 to 8.5 minute bosses. I prefer them to be, you know, 10.5, 11 minutes, 12 minutes maybe for the final one, as opposed to what they've been. All right. There's a question here where somebody says their friend was in a trial, and then they were tanking the boss at first and died, and then the other tank took over and reported them, and they got temp banned? The person who, your friend, got temp banned for dying in a trial, and then the other tank reported them and said they did nothing, and they got temp banned. There's a comment under that I agree with. There's definitely context missing. They don't just ban you for being the first tank and dying. If he died and then the other tank took over and then something else happened, I'd believe this more. But this feels like a very much one side of the story and not the whole story kind of situation. So my opinion on it is that I'm not being given the truth. So that's how I feel. So, you know, if you can find the rest of that story, I might be able to give an opinion on it. But, and then here's the question about the alt thing, which I went into greater detail on. Somebody asked me about the Tate situation. Yeah, I posted about it on Twitter. It angers me so much, that situation. So, it's not something I've talked about on YouTube. Drak basically summed up everything. The comment section, of course, covers that as well. It's just, well, my Static's got a new 8th member, at least. But that whole situation is just so fucked. I don't, you know, I'm getting upset even thinking about it again. And then the last 2 things are just Happy Brambles do suck. My Static doesn't use Happy Brambles. I didn't demand other people use them. I don't have any issue with them, but casters do. Even though I've had some casters say they have no problem saving stuff for it, I have others who don't have that same input. We don't even use them in my own Static anymore. I didn't even come up with those brambles. I only came up with the fact that the tanks and the healers go north and the DPS goes south. And I was like, Happy Brambles. And I'm like, no, I went to bed. No, I've been Iliad. I didn't. It was just a week one strat. You weren't supposed to do it forever. You're supposed to evolve and get better. That's why I hate making guides. I like making guides for some things. Some things I don't like making guides for. Oh, man. But anyway, and then the last one I think is the same person who said they hide their logs, and they said they've been banned for using the logs against me, for joining Party Finder. They don't look where they should. They look at the meta, whatever it is. I was called many names last week. I hate people using logs against others for the wrong reasons. Never seen it used for a good reason unless bragging about their own output. I've seen it used for good reasons plenty of times. But I also do see when people look at somebody's... Here's a big thing. How much a log is used against someone is very, very important. And again, yeah, logs do need to be... this is going to be the same point I made last week. Logs do need to be used in a very particular way. If somebody doesn't have good logs on a fight, you don't just look at the number. You then go into the fight and you analyze the actual data. Now, if somebody goes into your logs, right, and they find that you are let's just, this is all make-believe. Let's say you're a monk, and they look at your parse, and they go, oh, man, that's the parse that they have. I mean, what happened? Let me look at their runs. They look at the runs, and they see, oh, they had, like, mostly uptime, but they died here? And looks like somebody else died here. So I don't know if that means they screwed up or the other person screwed up. Or maybe they didn't get healed enough. Let me look at the healer log. So you have to go through all these elements. Most people aren't going to do that. But some people can look at a log and see things like you only used Brotherhood 1 time. Or your boss uptime was only 80%. Which, you know, is, regardless of mechanics, going to be definitely much lower than a melee wants to be. There are useful ways people can break down logs, either to learn for themselves or to learn about the person who's trying to join and determine in a more fair way without as much name calling that somebody may or may not be a fit. They may or may not want to spend the time. I remember I did an E6, a Furor Savage, with 2 black mages. One black mage, 90 percentiles, 95 percentiles. Dude was killing it. He could easily point out any mistake he made. He would look to improve it. And it was a great black mage. The other black mage was doing 7,000 DPS. And he's joining E6 Savage. That's not acceptable at all. You shouldn't be joining a Savage if you, especially a re-clear, not like a prog party or a re-clear. I'm sorry, or like a first time clear. This is a weekly clear party, which means this person beat it before because everyone had to have re-cleared. That's unacceptable. If the person's learning it for the first time and they're like, all right, sorry, I don't normally play Black Mage, I'm giving it a shot for the first week. And then they're working on it. But no, you could kind of just like see that this was just like how they played. This was just what they considered like acceptable play. And that's the problem, man. So a lot of the times people feel the need to open their mouth. If you see something like that, you just, honestly, I just leave. I'm not going to say anything to anybody. I'm not going to make them feel like crap. But a lot of people feel the need to do that. I'm just like, whatever. I'll try a couple more times and then that's it. And I'm moving on. But it happens. I've seen it happen so many times. But again, this is kind of like that other question where I only know what you're telling me. And I don't know everything. I don't know how it's being used against you. I don't know how much your threshold is for somebody criticizing your gameplay. I don't know how well you actually play versus what your logs say you do. So I have to take the most diplomatic stance on this and say, the way the game works, people want to know how you're performing. If you're only performing poorly because other people are killing you, then you can record gameplay, you can analyze it, you can do your best to do whatever you can with the logs with the time you're given. But I have a hard time personally seeing that that's it. That's the only thing that's happening is you're just being killed over and over again. And that's the only reason the result is the way that it is. Whereas there could always be an element of, okay, with the time I'm alive, what could I be doing better? There's no like looking inside and being like, where should I be improving? Just because I'm dying doesn't mean I can't learn something or improve. I'm not seeing that. And it just makes it hard for me to comment on, like, to just pick your side, be like, oh yeah, you're right, that's bullshit. I can't do that. It just isn't the way my brain is wired. So that's going to be the last point that I take here. I mean, the very last question is Brambles suck, but that's not a question. And, you know, I don't agree necessarily, but I do think there's better ways to do it. So at the very least, I'll give you that. But with that, that's going to be the last question for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. It ended up being exactly the same length as every other episode. Probably shorter because I didn't take any cuts or anything like that. But, yeah, I'm sorry. I thought, for some reason, I looked through it. I gotta pay more attention, man. I looked through all this, and I'm like, oh, there's like a question here about you stream for 11 hours. Wow. Big question in the thumbnail. Wow. You know, how do I sub to the game? That can't be real. It can't be a real question, right? How do I sub to the game? I can't accept that's a real. I'm sorry. If it is a real question, I apologize. But I can't look at that and assume that's correct. It's my brain again doesn't. I apologize, but there were more questions than I thought. There were just a lot of questions that didn't have the hashtag. I think that's really what got past me. Is there are a lot of questions without it. There's some comments with it, and I kind of underestimated how many there were. But either way, I made sure to comment on everything, so you know that I saw it all. And I took more time to actually read into it when I did it this way. Just a lot more exhausting to do it without taking breaks in between, and without a glass of water next to me in case I need a break. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. Thank you for asking your questions. Don't forget, if you do have a question, ask it in the comment section of the video below, and I'll do my best to get to it when we do our weekly Q&As. But with that, thank you for watching. I'll see you at the Friday stream. We got a stream on Friday. State of the Realm, meet at the Sly. First reactions, analysis, thoughts, live letter, announcement stream, 7 to 8 hours. It's going to be a good time. With that, I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, take care.